All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully, your favorite Chelsea podcast out there, and a part of the Men in Blazers Media Network. Dan, one of your hosts here. No Nick, because it is the João Pedro scouting special. And look, we tried to get the recording for this one timed perfectly, but then Enzo Maresca said, you know what? I'm going to start my guy, and he's going to go score two insane goals to put Chelsea into the Club World Cup final. Absolutely amazing the way that he played against Fluminense. So, Sam, a little bit of a different player preview profile scouting pod that we've done in the past, because we've now seen him actually play in a Chelsea shirt twice, both with the cameo he had in his first game and then also the start he had just yesterday as of time of recording on the Wednesday. I know that changes the dynamic a little bit. We are going to try to give that wholesome view like we do normally. We go through the background, his footballing experience, how he'd been playing previously at Brighton under multiple systems, strengths and weaknesses. But this does feel a little different because we've already had a chance to see the player score two goals for Chelsea. And sometimes we have seen many strikers, many forwards come to Chelsea, and those first two goals take forever to arrive.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're a center forward. I mean, the pressure is, on. With João Pedro, you really don't know what he is. Is he a center forward? Is he, attacking midfielder? Is he a second striker? It's a bit of a conundrum for everybody that's, obviously nurtured him from his youth days. But what is good is that we're getting a player with great all-round experience, and obviously to be able to come again and play against a side that you're very familiar with. A lot of Brazilian sides there. So came on and did a superb job. So yeah, just excellent to see, like, at least a small sample size in terms of how he would fit and what you can expect from him. But obviously, in the Premier League, with all due respect to the Brasileirão, is going to be a different challenge. The good thing is that he's experienced. He's had a taste of the big time for quite some time. I mean, he's quite a veteran compared to the others in the squad. So here's to hoping that good things are in store for everybody involved.
That is exactly what we would hope. And again, as we get into this episode, structure for the pod, we will be talking again about that footballing background, the journey Sam put together, a little bit of a tapestry of the player. Then we'll get into that tactical fit, his time at Brighton, the strengths, the weaknesses, and then we have a bunch of questions from you, our wonderful listeners, giving us kind of the perspective, some additional thoughts and considerations that we should put into this episode. But before that, as always, we'd like to thank you for listening to the podcast. Again, if you watch or view on YouTube, you can subscribe, like, and comment. We super appreciate that. If you listen on the audio format, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Always helps people find the show. In the show notes, you can find links to things like our Discord community, free to paid capacity, our weekly newsletter, the London Blue Dispatch. Great ways to help support the podcast. But Sam, take it away. Give us the story of João Pedro and what people need to know about his background beyond just the 60, 70 minutes, 80 minutes we've seen of him in a Chelsea shirt.
Yeah, quite the unorthodox way to start this one, to be honest. But yeah, around a year after he was born in 2001, his father Chicao, who's a former professional player for Botafogo, was sentenced to prison for 16 years for being an accessory to murder. And his parents separated quite early, and his mother Flavia was somebody who worked in sales. So at the age of 10, obviously Joe was playing, football at youth level. But from there, he traveled 4 hours away from his home in Ribeirão Preto for a youth tournament. And he played as a defensive midfielder, which was the position that his father played in. And he ended up scoring twice. And during that game, a Fluminense scout was in attendance. He took note and he sent the message upwards to the hierarchy saying, we might have a good player here. So Joao was invited for a trial. He basically, it took one training session for them to see that this was a very, very good talent. And he was asked to move to Rio within the week. So his mother, Flavia, resigned from her job. She vacated their home, put everything that she could in the car, and essentially moved to Rio, to essentially support her child's dreams. And she said in an interview that people said that she was crazy. And it sort of was a little prophetic in nature because in Rio, Flavia struggled with work and, trying to find a new job, trying to find just stability in a new city was very, very tough. So she was so overwhelmed that she had to go to the Fluminense Academy to ask for help. She was literally in tears. And Marcelo Teixeira, the academy director there, he essentially just gave her a hug and said, don't worry. The club came back very soon with better terms, and that helped her cope. And the quote that she gives to Globo Sport is that the help created a friendship. It was fundamental for everything that came after. I tell people that Fluminense embrace people because they helped change our lives. And I think that also gave Joao just a foundation of loyalty and commitment to Fluminense. So he started his proper training there. And during his 8 years with them, he essentially had a lot more challenges between the ages of 14 and 16. He had a growth spurt causing issues that were quite similar to what Kai Havertz went through when we did the pod for him. Just went from a skinny, gangly kid to suddenly shooting up at 16. And at that point, he wasn't even starting for the under 16. So very frustrated, didn't really know what was happening to his body. And after that, his coaches started encouraging him to, at least till the age of 16, try out different positions. So he went from defensive midfielder to attacking midfielder to winger and eventually centre forward. And it was in 2018 for the under 20 side when the move to centre forward finally paid off. He ended up scoring 38 goals for the side. And a year later, even before he made his senior debut, Watford, who had previously scouted another Fluminense talent in Richarlison, helped him, get to the PL and then sold him to Everton. They really moved quickly to say that, okay, we're definitely investing in him. And Joao was quite anxious about not making the Fluminense senior team, but he eventually did make it in April 2019. He scored 7 goals in the next 4 appearances, and before the end of the season, Liverpool, Barcelona, and Manchester City were all very keen to hijack the Watford deal, but luckily nothing happened. He moved to Watford in the shadow of COVID, played only 25 minutes as Watford were relegated to the Championship. And 3 seasons later, he was bought by Brighton, where he played under De Zerbi and then Fabian Herzler last year. And essentially, we moved very quickly to secure his services. There was repeated interest from elsewhere, but um, last night he faced the club that molded him, saved his family, and he scored twice, respectfully refusing to celebrate, and then having some lovely words for them in the post game. So yeah, that's the gist of it there.
Great little summary, and again, usually the first time, and I don't imagine there's going to be many opportunities playing for Chelsea Football Club where he's going to get a chance to go up against Fluminense. So, did the right thing by the team that was his childhood club, and find favor to do that as well. So great work there from him. Really good summary about just how he got to Chelsea and what that journey looked like. But look, we're going to take a very, very quick first ad break when we get back. It's all about the tactical fit, the strengths, and how he is going to help improve this Chelsea team and hopefully thrive under Enzo Maresca. So stay tuned. We are back. All right, Sam. So coming back after the break, we've had a chance to see a couple different players come from Brighton to Chelsea. I think some we feel way, way better about than others, like a Moises Caicedo compared to, say, a Rob Sanchez. How did João Pedro get on at Brighton? And maybe after we talk about that, we can, maybe dive into some strengths.
Yeah, this is a section I purely put in because of something that he interestingly mentioned post game. And he said that it found it easy to adapt because De Zerbi and Maresca have similar ideas in terms of how they wish to play the game. So that was something that I found quite intriguing. And I did watch about 4 or 5 games from De Zerbi, and essentially tried to see how he would profile João Pedro. And João played left wing, he played central attacking midfield, he played centre forward, both by himself and in a two-striker system for De Zerbi. And the good thing was the Italian manager recognized his strengths and used him to manipulate the opposition line. So he essentially found out that, yeah, you need to give him the license to roam, give him, he's a very associative player by nature. He loves combining with players around him. So in De Zerbi's system, very often if he played a back three, for example, or a four, Estupinian on the left-hand side would essentially go on and hold with. And what that would do is move the left winger where João Pedro would play inside into the left attacking midfielder position in the half space. And from there, he had the freedom to, rotate with Estupinian. He would essentially switch to the central area. Sometimes he would also switch with the centre forward in Welbeck. And when he was playing centre forward, he was given the license to do what Maresca obviously asked his centre forwards to do also, which was, drop in between your attacking midfielders in that box midfield, make that overload happen, that central overload with five players, link up with people, and then try to release your wingers or essentially get your attacking midfielders, like Enzo Fernandez example, run in behind and find him with long ball. So it is quite similar in both respects, and it's quite intriguing for me that Maresca has looked at all of that and started him at centre forward and essentially tried to do and work with the same ideas. De Zerbi and Maresca obviously are very good friends, and they have talked a lot. De Zerbi, in fact, recommended Maresca as one of his options for a coaching job, so they are quite close. So I imagine Maresca's had a very good chat with him in terms of how to use him and what are the ideas he can use to bring the best out of him.
And then, kind of jumping in a little bit to the strengths. I mean, I think, we've had a chance maybe to see even just now firsthand some of the versatility, the way he kind of plays across the front, and, really how he was able to get involved in the attack on kind of a couple different phases. Walk me through what you think some of those primary strengths are, again, both from the context of his time before, being a Chelsea player and his time maybe over to see these last, 80, 90 minutes.
Yeah, I think the first thing that I would like to mention is something that I also gave a customary glance to in, the intro part, is the fact that he is an extremely versatile, well-rounded forward. So education across multiple positions, I think, makes him just an all-round threat. He's really got a lot of different aspects that he's borrowed from different roles and positions that he's played. A lot of people know that Harry Kane was played in the pivot at academy level, and his coaches wanted him to develop what it was like playing deeper and to be able to find those passes and those options and map out the field in front of him. And we talked about João Pedro playing as a left winger, as a defensive midfielder, obviously started there, but also central midfielder and then further forward. But just those key aspects, developing those nuances in terms of what he does when he's deeper. I think he's got a really nice knack of pulling out those little things and doing them well. Most often, you see centre forwards drop deep, and you ask them to play a certain position. Liam Dilap being a very good example. Then you see those weaknesses happen. Are you passing well? Are you scanning well? Where are your options? How good is your touch? Where are you turning? How good is your vision? How good is your long passing? Very encouraged to say that João Pedro is somebody who exemplifies all those qualities. He's able to do all of those little things to a very good degree, which makes him quite an interesting fit as a forward player. So I think that's by far his biggest strength, the fact that he's played across the front line, also deeper. The first quality that pops out to me in terms of what he's very good at is link up. And if you look at his passing stats, Dan, in Europe's top 5 leagues, he compares with his peers in the 90 to the 99th percentile for nearly all passing metrics, quality and quantity wise. So he attempts a high quality amount of passes. He also completes a high quality of them. And the fact that he's doing them in, obviously he's doing them in deeper areas where there's less pressure. And sometimes those progressive pass aspects are juiced up, but most often than not, when he's dropping from the front line and he's trying to find those little passes under pressure, he does really well. He's got excellent close control when he's under duress. He manipulates the ball well on the ground and also very good in the air. So if the ball is like at chest level, he has these lovely flicks to take it away from pressure. He shows very good awareness of options in front and even behind him. So he uses these back heels and flicks to try and find them. So I believe that he's somebody who's just spatially very aware of how the field is mapped out around him. And I really believe that the stats don't reflect his vision or his passing prowess. I genuinely believe that if he develops a strong synergy with the players in and around him and the quality that we're able to provide him, he could develop into just, a key pass machine, somebody who's also adding a lot of assists to his game. So some of the passing that I've seen him pull out in certain games when he's dropping deep is phenomenal to see from a center forward slash second forward. So it's great to see that. And yeah, and the third thing that I probably want to highlight is his heading. He's got an excellent header on him, generates very strong power, and I think he combines it with a good degree of control. He's able to place it well. He scored a really nice goal against us from a near post position where he, from a corner, just flicked it across goal and into the far corner with some really good maneuvering with his head. And he's got a very good leap as well, Dan. He competes in a lot of duels. Not really has a doesn't really have a great success rate, but he jumps for everything. And when you see the best of him is when the ball breaks loose or if it's just floating in the box and you see him charging in and essentially trying to, batter it in. He's quite brave, very determined to plow into those loose balls. He's also got like a preference of just hanging around the far post where he can go up against fullbacks instead of like Premier League centre backs. And he's clever in those respects where he's got, I would say like a fair amount of far post headers and goals in his armory. So I would say heading is also something good, especially considering Dan that we've missed that in the box. Jackson hasn't been great. Sancho, Madueke, Mudryk, all of these guys aren't really, really good headers of the ball. So and this is definitely one guy you've added to the front line who can give you something in that respect.
And then kind of continuing along that line, I mean, I think we've seen a couple other things. People have called into question maybe the fact that he had an elevated number of goals relative to the fact that he was taking penalties. Again, some of the things that maybe people criticize Cole Palmer for a season prior, or in terms of just quote unquote the stat pad. But I mean, you have to go up and take him and score him to get the inclusion for it. So I think that probably should be taken into consideration, and then also maybe just how he's going to be able to navigate against other defenders as he can, or against defenders rather, as he's taking the ball to him. And we saw a little bit of that on the second goal that he scored, and just how he decided to kind of force the run, make it a kind of challenging shot necessarily, but really put himself in a situation like really, really great spatial awareness. I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you've seen in the footage relative to those, and maybe any other kind of strengths that you really want to highlight.
Yeah, I think his take-ons and dribbling style remind me a lot of Pekin Kunku. I mean, he's not somebody who's kittens, who will try to blaze past and essentially take 1v1s into space and, try to beat you with pure speed. He's somebody who's a very reactive ball manipulator who's more about baiting opponents. Like he'll wait for you to challenge, he'll wait for you to try and, tackle him before a clever flick over the foot, or he'll nutmeg you, or he'll just essentially elastico you into space. So he's quite wily, quite nifty in that matters. He's very good with his feet, and he's got a very good shot burst and agility, which allows him to create that momentary yard and of separation when the defender commits. He's also two-footed, Dan. So when you see him control the ball, he uses the left and the right foot, not one-footed. He's got a great ability to turn away from pressure, and the sharp turns essentially are just when he drops his shoulder. Very nice the way that he creates space for himself. So escapes pressure well, and he's quite effective in that pocket, considering that he loves dropping away from that front line and receiving in those little spaces between the two lines. It makes him a very, very potent threat because the skill set aligns with what is required. You mentioned penalties, composed, highly reliable. I've been quite impressed with his penalty taking. He scored 11 of the 12 penalties that he's taken in his senior career. The style has remained consistent, like he jogs while looking straight at the keeper. And what I think really sets him out is the fact that he can change his mind if the keeper dives early, even at the last moment. He has taken 9 penalties for Brighton. I analyzed all of them, and he sent the keeper the wrong way 7 times out of those. One was saved. I believe West Ham's keeper saved that, and it was scored on the rebound. And Bernd Leno guessed the right way, and I think got a glove on it. But everybody else he sent the other way, which was very impressive to see. So that was also something that I think is a key strength. We talk about penalties not really being something, oh yeah, you stat padding and stuff, unless, you go into a Champions League final and you want somebody reliable to step up. So yeah, definitely. I think it's a big strength to have. And we talked about just the second goal that you talked about, just the ability to take on players, see two players in front of you, make that yard, take them on, and then lash it in, thundering the crossbar on the way in. It's just his ability to run the channels. He's very comfortable on the wing. So more often than not, when he's playing in those central positions, he has this tendency to drift to the left hand side. Can do it on the right as well, but likes doing the left. You can find him with long balls, and he'll essentially hold it up. Something that he probably needs to work on is maybe just trying to get into space rather than turning back. A lot of the times when the ball comes to him, and in long ball, he tries to hold it up, tries to turn around and find options instead of realizing that, oh, sometimes there is a lot more space than he envisions at first glance, and there's a chance to do a 1v1 and get into space. But he is quite, I would say, assesses the risks and tries to take a more sensible option, which a lot of managers prefer. But the ability to run the flank, the ability to just drift wide, leave the center vacant is something that would be quite interesting in this side, considering the options that you have. I really don't know what's going to happen with Nkunku, but if you have, say, a João Pedro at center forward and Christopher Nkunku in that left hand side position in that pocket, there could be some very interesting interchanges happening there. So even Dilap, for example, who plays at centre forward, loves drifting to the left hand side for those runs. So if João Pedro is playing behind him, then you can assume that you've got a secondary striker option in that position who can do everything possible in those situations. So quite encouraging, Dan. I think he has like we mentioned, just a multi-dimensional skill set, and being able to play across the 5 zones is a big plus for a player.
Yeah, huge things to keep in mind. I mean, there are things that we're going to want to point out that he can improve upon to just take him to even new heights, and also a bunch of your listener questions I want to get to as well. But we're going to do that after our last ad break. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. All right, Sam, we always like to set the expectation that not every player is perfect, though if you judge Joao Pedro off of that performance, you might say, hey, he's perfect in a Chelsea shirt so far. So where can he improve? How can he get better? And where are you looking for, Enzo Maresca in particular to kind of help him unlock maybe a new level?
Yeah, I think the finishing shooting aspect, which I believe is a lot of people are concerned about in the Discord, as well as just general concern in the fan base in terms of can he provide the goals. And I do believe his penalty numbers do inflate the stats. If you look at the non-penalty expected goals, he's only scored 13 open play goals in 3 seasons in the Premier League, I believe. And he hasn't broken past the 5 open play goals mark in his career. And with Palmer taking penalties, you expect he has to just boost those non-penalty numbers as much as he can. So he has struggled to outperform his non-penalty expected goals. I think there are only 2 seasons in his senior career where he's been in the green. All the other ones have either been level or red. So it's probably like small deviations there, but you don't really see somebody who's probably offering you enough evidence that he is, world class 1v1 talent. He's still got a lot of stuff to do. I'm also quite concerned about just his ability to create separation against elite centre backs. He's a little slow in the way that he creates that yard, not not really explosive, and the ability to get shots away against those people for me remains a question mark. He was able to do it against Thiago Silva in the last game, and maybe like Premier League centre backs will offer a lot more food for thought when he comes into those positions. He, in my opinion, looks way better coming off the second line rather than being a centre forward. I mean, we've got just a 1 game sample size where he's played as the centre forward and he's scored, 2 peach of like worldies in that aspect. But I do believe that in the Premier League, he might face a little more resistance. He's obviously faced that for Brighton, but the dynamics have been different. So, but encouragingly, when I look at it, I see the fact that he can shoot with power. He can shoot with both feet and from range, as we saw all of it in against Fluminense. But just the fact that we don't really have an encouraging sample size, I would say. But again, if you play for a side that offers you that amount of uplift in terms of quality, I believe the numbers might just go up. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed there. And the second thing is I think his strength and balance can be a little wobbly. He is vulnerable to loss of equilibrium when he's enduring medium to high level contact. So More often than not, you will see this when he's trying to drop from central position, so from center forward or from the number 10 position. A smart push, a shove from a center back that's marking him tightly can upset his control or his touch. So I would say he does very well when he's facing his opponent, and he can see where the contact is coming from and he can ride it. But back to goal is where I think some of the weaker aspects of his hold up play, some of his ability to just resist contact can become an issue. And I think that's holding him back from being an elite center forward. And the last thing I would be, if I could be nitty gritty with what I want to pick out, I would say that it's his box movement. I'm like there are some things he does well, and what I really like about him is that he's instinctual. You sort of like see a lot of the times he'll follow up and he'll end up in the right positions at the right time. He has this nice goal scorer's instinct where he's at just picking out those little moments where he knows if there's a shot coming from long range, then the keeper's going to spill it and he is in that zone to try and tuck it in. He's done that against Arsenal, a couple of other sides where it looks like he's generally got that brain, the centre forward's brain for just sniffing out the goal inside the box. But in terms of double movements, in terms of losing his marker, in terms of just offering a little bit of volatility in the box, I think that's where he can be better, and it's something that I think he can improve. He's just I think that's when I look at him. I probably say that he's not a number 9 in my eyes. He's more of a second forward. He's somebody who can play behind a conventional center forward and offer you the best of his abilities. But if I were to see him in the number 9 role that Maresca played him in, then as the main reference point up front, I would like him to develop at least those fundamentals inside the box, which, by the way, Liam Delap does really, really well if you watch Cole Palmer's goal in the game. So yeah, I think that would be the three aspects I would highlight as areas to improve.
So, jumping into listener questions, then I think we have a fair number here to give us some medium to hot, spicy takes. Techie Tiger coming right at the top from Discord with will João Pedro be a better signing than Liam Delap? I mean, just put it on record right now, Sam. Who's going to be the better signing?
Well, I think it's unfair to Liam Delap to compare both of them. I don't think they're competing for the single position. I do believe, like a lot of the journalists that did talk about Chelsea wanting a versatile forward profile. We talked about Mohamed Kudus, who's now gone to Tottenham. I think Joao Pedro was more about just finding a very, very good position, maybe as in the Nkunku slash Felix role, but somebody who can also cover centre forward, somebody who can also cover left or right wing, and I think that's where Pedro stands. So I wouldn't really compare him to Liam Delap. I think Delap is quite raw. I think he's got some very good upsides inside the box. Outside it, he still has to improve. So I mean, Joao Pedro has 3 seasons, 2.5 seasons on him in terms of just acclimatizing to the Premier League and playing for, playing in those positions and getting that education. So I do believe that he's way, way better than Dilap outside the box. Inside the box, I think Dilap is showing some interesting things, but I do believe their futures are aligned. You want, in my opinion, Joao Pedro to play with somebody like a Jackson or a Liam Delap behind him, essentially getting somebody else to be that guy who's pinning the back line, and then you are free to hold the strings and essentially, play them the way that you want them. So that's where he comes alive away from the front line, where he's got the freedom to choose his movements, freedom to choose his spots. So I think both are really good signings in that respect. One's for the future and one adds quality now.
And then maybe just kind of going a little bit deeper on Joao Pedro in particular, we had Daily 44.4 with the question of, do you find his shot volume over the course of his career problematic if we're going to be playing him as a striker? And I know we had the conversation around where you see him playing, potentially as that, second striker, or, not necessarily as the individual number 9. And there was kind of maybe a follow-up question to that with TK Lot asking, what do you make of his massively different year-to-year profile, shot heavy in 23 to creation heavy in 24-25? And how does this kind of fit within the squad and the side? So, I mean, two separate questions, but I feel like a little conjoined when it comes to that idea of, shot volume, and Chelsea maybe being a team last season in particular where we did a great job getting into the box, but sometimes we went through games where we were woefully undershooting in terms of getting to or putting shots rather on target that would allow us to get to goal.
Yeah, I think the overarching question here is that, obviously there are differences between the season before under De Zerbi and the season under Fabian Hürzeler that he's just finished. But just to highlight, there have been certain differences in the metrics. So if you look at his passing numbers, for example, the average passes that he attempted or completed last season were 7 on average lesser than the season before last. If you look at the number of touches that he was taking, those have also dropped. So, for example, 52.7 touches overall for De Zerbi per 90 minutes, and then that's dropped to 43.5. So you look at the numbers in terms of the influence that De Zerbi was offering them. I think it was a little more possession heavy. It was a little more allowing him to dictate terms. So 10 touches per game is quite a significant number. And I do believe that the profile sort of changing has got a lot to do with those aspects as well. Yeah, De Zerbi just gave him the freedom to move in the second line. With Welbeck sort of like being, his age and Evan Ferguson being out of favor, I think João Pedro had to drop into those number 9 positions and play almost like a first choice centre forward. And that brought its own challenges. You're marked by centre forwards very often. You're hounded around the pitch. When you're in the second line, you have a lot more freedom. So I do believe it's a stylistic difference. And I think those same issues might pop up if Maresca says, okay, Jackson is not really reliable. Dilap is still a bit raw. So I might just start you as the key number 9. Like, let's just go with you as the number 9 option. But Champions League, I see it working really well. But against sides that want to sit back, there could be an issue or two, I believe. So that's answering, one part of the question. The second is I don't think really these season-on-season numbers could be that big of an issue, in my opinion. Last season under De Zerbi, his numbers were quite good. Like if you're having a second forward that's offering you say 3.08, which was his tally per 90 minutes, that would be a good number for me. 3 to 4 shots is excellent territory. I mean, 3.5 plus is excellent territory. That's Mohamed Salah territory. So if you can get somewhere around those shots, it's very, very good. But yeah, last season he dropped by an entire shot to 1.94. So that is concerning. It definitely is a bit of a question mark. But again, I do believe, again, from a centre forward's perspective, those challenges were again quite new to him to be consistently being in those positions. And maybe he needs to sort of like improve upon that. Like those shot quality numbers need to go up. Obviously, you'll have a lot more possession in the Chelsea side. You'll have a lot more quality possession in the Chelsea side, which Brighton probably weren't able to provide. So I do believe the numbers could be quite different. And yeah, if those 2 shots are anything like the 2 that he took against Fluminense, then I believe we're in for a good time.
Well, we can only hope they're as consistently as good as those 2 shots. Tyson had a question again mentioning this idea of, is he not just another 9.5 that doesn't really fit what Maresca does? Strikes me more as a physical Nkunku that's better in the air. I mean, his header wasn't necessarily that great that we had a chance to see in this last game. I know we did talk about this idea that his heading is a strength a little bit earlier in the episode. What do you make about just the fact that he is so tactically flexible that maybe he gets lost in the system? Do you feel like that could happen under Maresca?
Yeah, there's always, I think, the danger that you start to see like 6 or 7 games where there's been dry spell and people saying, "Oh, he's just another Kai Havertz." Like he's not really a 9. He's not really a number 10. He's not really a left winger or right winger in Havertz's case. So what is he? So it is again quite amorphous at this point in time. But I do see, like, based on evidence in the Premier League, that he's got a good chance of at least replicating a more useful role in the system. And that particular role also comes, I think, with Maresca making the changes that he had. He's just moved his fullbacks into positions where they can hold width, and the winger is coming inside into those half spaces. We saw Palmer doing that a couple of games ago, starting on the right wing, Then, the game against Benfica, he starts on the left, and then essentially you have Kukureya pushing in and Palmer moving into those half spaces. So if that happens, if Kukureya is allowed to be in those positions, then I do believe that you've got a really nice role for João Pedro there as the left-sided, LW, and that's exactly the role that fits in Kunku as well. So, and we saw that again, Maresca magically deciding Gusto needs to overlap, and Kunku moves from right wing to RAM and has a good game. Dan, he genuinely looks like he enjoyed that position, loves interchanging and making those little things happen, and that's what João Pedro is. So I think the comparison from Tyson is spot on. And like I said, he was brought in to probably replace Nkunku and Joao Felix, who are those AMs behind the centre forward rather than wingers, which Felix and Nkunku both played as in last season. So I think there is a role for him there. He is very similar to Nkunku, the way that his dribbling prowess, his shooting and stuff. And we can only hope that Maresca recognizes that and says, okay, we're probably going to give you the environment and the role that you need to thrive. So that's what I'm hoping from him this season.
Oh, fingers crossed that all that goodness comes to fruition. We had another question from Pendergrass Chris asking, what does he offer as a 9 that Jackson doesn't? So a little bit more comparison against, Nico Jackson. We have kind of caveated that we don't necessarily view him directly as a 9, but maybe kind of comparing him in relation to, Nico Jackson, because we have seen Nico be able to kind of switch out to play, from the left wing perspective. What does that look like in your mind, kind of comparing the two profiles? What do we get more of when we have João Pedro on the pitch versus having Nico Jackson on the pitch?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think what Jackson does better is one thing that really pops to mind is defensive intensity. I think in terms of pressing with that amount of vigor and to be able to cause an issue, Jackson does it very well. He's quite nippy. He loves getting stuck in. João Pedro can be a little moody. He can offer you some good presses, but most of the times he's a little bit more cautious in terms of when to press. I think he like conserving his energy more. So I think on those grounds, Jackson does well. But when it comes to aerial threat in the box, something that we've missed, we mentioned about, I think he's way way better than Jackson, and we've seen a lot of those times. Then in last season, we got some good crosses coming in from both those half spaces. Neto doing it, Non doing it, Palmer doing it, Levi Colville doing it to the far post, Kukureya making the most of it. But you really genuinely just need one reference point in there to offer some kind of threat, and that's what I believe Joao Pedro does better in the box than Jackson. Outside, I would say it's quite a mixed bag. I think Jackson's link up play is relatively good. His ability to spin his man and run in behind is also very good. Jackson was, I think, the Premier League's leader for sprints in behind, so he offers a lot of intensity. But Pedro is probably just the opposite end. He's somebody who likes coming inside. He's always about trying to turn, become the extra midfielder, which I believe Jackson can't do. And Jackson is more of a winger, a wide forward who's been taught to play centre forward. But if you want an extra man and almost an extra attacking midfielder, a false 9, then Joao Pedro is probably a better option. And we saw this then from Maresca last season, where we didn't have centre forwards because one was suspended, the other was injured, or both were injured. Then Palmer or Neto went up to false 9. I really genuinely believe that you will get a lot more value for your money when you put Joao Pedro there. You can, in emergency purposes, ask him to drop very deep. Then you can get Neto and Gittins to make runs in behind and try to find them with quick deliveries. So I think trying to utilize those profiles, those quick winger slash wide forward profiles, and having somebody in that central position to utilize them, to find them, I think Pedro does that job for you much, much better than Jackson does.
And then one of our last questions here, Levin Aspie's asking, are you concerned at all with the fact that every one of our current first team strikers, excluding Guillou, seem to have discipline problems? And they're highlighting to the fact that, whether it was Nico Jackson, Liam Dilap, now João Pedro, all of them seemingly are a magnet to yellow cards. Some wanting the smoke, some making necessarily unfortunate decisions when they're on the pitch. How do you view that as something that maybe is just accumulated within our grouping of players and the challenge that they'll have and the rest of the team will have to kind of work through that.
It is quite it is going to be quite the challenge. I mean, the last thing you want is your center forwards missing quarterfinals and semifinals, which has already happened in the Club World Cup. So yeah, I mean, Dilap was, I think, league leader last season for yellow cards with 12. Jackson, we've seen get sent off for dumb fouls, within 4 minutes and first half against Newcastle. So it is like the discipline issue is, I think, prominent amongst the squad. We were again the only side to cross 100 yellows last season. So when I'm looking at it holistically, is that an issue? Yes, but I quite like the aggression. I quite like the intensity. I quite like the fact that you are not nice people. I'm tempted to use a more aggressive word that Jose Mourinho uses in the All or Nothing documentary for Tottenham, but just not having nice players does a world of a difference in terms of how well you look out of possession. So João Pedro is there. He does a little bit of nasty stuff, which makes him very unlikable to the opposition. But I look at his yellow card numbers and 2022, 2023 in the championship, 7 in 31 90s, 23, 24, 2 yellows in 22 90s. And then last season, 4 yellows. One red is the big issue, but 2 reds in 5.5 seasons isn't that bad, Dan. I think it's quite fine. And the yellow cards are also quite decent. The foul count is also basically just 1.5 per game, which I believe is just respectable. So I don't think you'd have a lot of issue from Joao in that matter. But yeah, Dilap, Jackson, Moises Caicedo, Cucurella, those guys definitely guys to watch.
Things to kind of keep in mind. And as we like to, when we round out these episodes, we try to set an expectation for what would be a good first season and what would be a great first season for the player at Chelsea. And again, little skewed because he could come in and be the individual that gets Chelsea across the line in the Club World Cup, which is going to just immediately start his season, first season with Chelsea, off on the best possible foot. What is that good start? What's that great start? Viewing it more so from the beginning of the Premier League season forward, including our Champions League campaign and our 2 domestic cup campaigns.
Yeah, I think definitely getting 10 goals, like 10 open play, non-penalty goals would be a good start for him. I think that's something that he needs to prove to himself, that he is ready, willing to hit the next level and get those goal count numbers up. I think if Maresca gives him the left attacking midfield role, and I'm pretty sure there will be a lot of shuffling around in terms of, oh, we've got Gittins, oh, we've got Palmer, we've got, Neto, nobody knows where Maduke is going to be. So in terms of just getting the setup right, it's going to be a lot more brainstorming. But if you can give him that ideal setup behind the center forward, I do believe 10 goals and maybe adding assist numbers. Like he did well last season, but just to amp them up and essentially get them to, or probably even maintain the level that he did last season with 6 assists, I think is a good number. So 15 goals and assists maybe with no penalty involvements, I believe would be a very good season. And yeah, in terms of expectations, obviously when you're looking at the player that he is, the athletic, compare him to Roberto Firmino. I mean Brazilian. You've got the 9.5 profile, so a lot of things do fit, do align. So I do believe that he can offer you that kind of a profile, just number 9 position, quite a unique interpretation of it in a false 9 perspective. Somebody who's clever, somebody who can offer you some really tricky passes in behind for those quicker players. So yeah, I do believe from a profile standpoint, you are adding something unique to the side. So I would just probably focus on his output. So can you give me 3 shots per 90 minutes? Can you give me 10 goals and 5 assists? And can you essentially play the season not being injured and try and offer us a different dimension that we don't have, which is knitting the attack together, bringing the most out of it, would probably constitute a very very good season for me. Dan, do you have any thoughts as well? Like, would you have a number in terms of where you see him finishing based on pre-season and everything you've seen of him at Brighton?
I mean, everything we're technically seeing in preseason right now leads me to believe he'll be Chelsea's top scorer next year, which, again, I would love for more players other than Cole Palmer to be adding in some significant numbers of goals and assists as it relates to just easing the burden a little bit. I mean, that's really what it all comes down to is can we get to a point where we have more players in this Chelsea team who are absolutely helping drive us forward across it. I mean, when you think about the fact that, in those kind of multiple seasons, those 2 seasons at Brighton, 19 goals, 9 assists, and then you take out the 9 penalties. I would love to see that at like actually that like 20 number, like, whether it's goals plus assist, whether it indexes more to goals than assists. I'm not really kind of too concerned about that. I would just love to see, another individual in the team be able to kind of push beyond the 20, particularly if, for whatever reason it means reduced minutes for Nico Jackson, whether it means, Nico's off and, he ends up being more of kind of the secondary individual or kind of floats around. I do think he's going to get plenty of chances, plenty of opportunities next season. And so I'm going to set the bar just a touch higher for what I think where the
Mhm.
season should be for him, but not unrealistically so, given the number of matches we will play next year.
Can I be a little unrealistic here?
Yeah, go for it.
No, I mean I actually went in and watched like Karim Benzema's early Lyon games, and I don't
Oh
know,
my
like
gosh.
you
Tell
know,
me what you're
yeah,
about to do here. Say it.
yeah. I mean it's quite an interesting thing because Benzema started off as at Lyon as a very very good just finisher, just being able to get goals in and around the box, and progressively throughout his career, he just, especially when he hit Real Madrid, like the first season was quite, I would say, average by his standards. He came at 21 and 8 goals and 3 assists in 14 starts, 27 games. Was like, but over those initial 4 5 seasons, even from 3 4 8 12 assists, 8 11 assists, 7 5 10 assists. And there was this dimension of being able to be, yeah, the center forward, but somebody who loves creating for the guys around him, somebody who found really, really good relationships with guys on the field, and just being able to utilize their creativity and also empower them with his passing. Really enjoyed it, and a little bit of what João Pedro could probably improve. I mean, Firmino was that guy for Liverpool as well, just feeding it to the two guys around him who were very, very good forwards in their own right. But I do believe if Joao does add a lot more creativity in terms of just honing and polishing that final product, he could be the guy who empowers your left winger or right winger to have more shots, to have more, sort of goal numbers and at least attempts on goal. So that's what I would want from him. I really believe that if he pushes and essentially becomes the player that everybody expects him to be, somewhere between peak Firmino and peak Benzema would be a really nice comp, because those guys can score and those guys can create and are intelligent movers. And I see a lot of that in Joao Pedro as well.
Well, there is the social clip there comparing him to Benzema. That is absolutely just a majestic way to end this episode, as where we will see Joao Pedro, according to Sam's prediction, on the completely on the ledge version of where this could go for our new number 20 and goal scorer in the semifinals to push Chelsea into the Club World Cup finals. But look, tons of great research, tons of great scouting, and a lot of excitement about one of Chelsea's new summer signings who's already proving himself in very quick fashion. But we want to thank you so much for listening to this episode about one Joao Pedro. We've got another episode coming out tomorrow that's going to be a little fun match preview for the Club World Cup final. We're going to get into all the specifics about the Club World Cup final next week, in addition to a couple other podcasts we got coming out. So enjoy those. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Also leave 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and get in the show notes so you can get our free weekly newsletter, get involved in our Discord community, and see all the other fun stuff we got going on. But until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep blue flag flying high.